As we move on to the next generation of gaming consoles, there's a lot of people who, like myself, are going back and revisiting video games from our past. Especially with the complete overhaul of backwards compatibility that the Xbox Series X offers, many of us are reliving our favorite childhood gaming memories once again. A lot of these games remind us why we love them in the first place. However, a large number of these games haven't exactly withstood the test of time. I remember the first time I played Twilight Princess on the GameCube and thinking, there's no way game graphics could ever get better than this. Yeah, this is the game I was talking about. Obviously, gaming has evolved drastically since then. So drastic that we probably take a lot of technology and graphics for granted. And while I love all the new games we are getting now, wouldn't it be nice if we could go back and see what our favorite childhood games would look like if they were released today? Well, if you said yes to that, I guess you're in luck, because it seems like all our favorite games are being remade more times than a King Kong movie. That being said, this is neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It's very much a case-by-case scenario. Some remakes are completely overhauled, boasting new gameplay mechanics, better sound design, and improved visuals, making these games almost a completely brand new experience to the player. Then you will find other games that have very minor changes just based on improving the aesthetics of the game. Both options can still be seen as positives and negatives. More changes doesn't exactly make a game better. One of the biggest factors to take into consideration is why people enjoyed playing that game in the first place. Take a game like The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, a game that is loved and cherished by so many, it was bound to eventually be remade. To completely overhaul the gameplay to become something entirely new would have been a misstep in my opinion. What they ended up doing was focused on just visuals alone. While we all love the classic look of the Game Boy Color, finding a familiar yet brand new way to play a classic gem like this was definitely the right call. Staying on the same topic of Zelda, the remake for Majora's Mask is a very different story. The original version of the game works best when it's dark and gritty, giving you the feeling of impending doom. Then, when they remade the game for the 3DS, all of that went out the window when they decided on a more colorful aesthetic. The classic version made you feel always tense and on edge, and the monotone colors and dark scenery gave you the sense of compassion for the townsfolk who had to live in this world. Altering the fundamental themes and tone of the game was definitely the wrong way to go about everything. Not to mention the stiffness of gameplay that used to feel so fluid, but these are remakes with mostly visual changes. How about the games that set out to improve the experience even further? Recently, we got the first part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and fans have been hyped about this for a long time. Now personally, I didn't play the original until very recently, so it isn't tied to nostalgia for me. However, I am aware that expectations were extremely high. Wouldn't it be a massive risk to change something everyone loves so much to look and play like an entirely different game? Not only has the music and visuals been altered to the extreme, they effectively discarded the original turn-based combat for a more beat-em-up hack-and-slash style of fighting. So did they succeed in improving the game from its cult classic debut? From an unbiased perspective, I think they did a great job. Although there's a stark contrast to what made the original feel so intense and dramatic, they were somehow able to remake the experience to feel familiar and yet refreshing. Melding new with old is definitely the best option for a remake like this to work. Changing so much in a game's remake is also a dangerous task. We also got Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. As much as we love seeing Crash back in action in full HD graphics, the changes to the core gameplay mechanics is detrimental to the game's experience. Maybe it's because we're so fond of the way it originally played, but regardless, some of the charm we know and love just isn't there. Sometimes the game feels so different from its origins that most players would rather just go back and play the standard version. Case in point, remakes in classic games like these are always going to be a hit or miss depending on what the player loved about the game in the first place. A lot of games are tied to nostalgia, so bringing something so meaningful to players back to life is a dangerous task. Sometimes you can feel the love and attention that developers put into these projects, and more times than others, it feels like a cash grab. Speaking of cash grabs, how about those definitive editions? Not to try to convince you that all remasters with added bonuses are bad games per se, but a lot of these are clearly easy shortcuts to making more money. I think a prime example of this is the remastered version of 2013's Deadpool game. Not 2 years later, they released the same game with very slight modifications. This didn't originally seem like a terrible idea, as it coincided with the release of the Xbox One and PS4, but the execution was very lazy. The game was practically exactly the same. Plus, it was brought back to full price with the excuse that it was brand new. Those were obvious complaints to have, but it was so unapologetically self-evident that they were trying to capitalize on the release of the Deadpool movie that came out in the same year. It was totally marketed to coincide with the film, yet practically nothing in the movie resembles the game. Players were essentially tricked into purchasing this game, and it wasn't even a good one at that. There are plenty of quote-unquote special, definitive, ultimate Game of the Year extravaganza edition games out there that add very little other than cosmetics and a few more insignificant bonuses. But that doesn't mean I don't believe that they're all without thought and care. By now you should know I will talk about the Persona series at any opportunity I get. But genuinely, I think this is a great example of a definitive edition done right. Atlus has been doing this thing with Persona since the third installment, where they will release a game, and then put out a special edition a few years later. For now, I'll just try to focus on Persona 5, as it is the most recent game in the series. Persona 5 was released in 2017, and then they released Persona 5 Royal in late 2019. I believe that this is justified with how much content they actually added to the game. Not just new characters, a new dungeon area, new story beats, but the entire storyline is seemingly reworked to fit the new content. Now there are so many new memorable moments littered throughout the game. New gameplay mechanics that almost seem like they should have been there all along, and new music that is just, so good. It is pretty clear how much love and care the developers have for their own creation, which will make you want to relive the experience all over again. So, what is the point of me telling you about all this? It's not like we've decided on an absolute answer to whether or not remakes and remasters are good or bad for the gaming industry as a whole. I think what I'm trying to say is that you, as a gamer, are the biggest deciding factor into what is remade and what isn't. Obviously, people will buy and play whatever game they want. I would never want to try to convince someone to stop doing something they enjoy. I just think it's important as a collective to be conscious that this is something that is happening more than ever right now, and it will be more and more common as the years go by. Remember that power that we hold together, and with a little hope, maybe someday your favorite childhood game will be brought back to life. So what games would you like to see be remade from your childhood? What's your favorite remake so far? Leave them in the comments below because I'm actually very curious to see what you guys grew up on. With that being said, subscribe for a new video every week, and I'll catch you guys next time.